Right now in Kumamoto, Japan, 18 people are dead after a 7.1 magnitude earthquake. 56,000 households have no running water. 3,900 homes have no electricity. Rescuers are still pulling bodies from a shopping mall that exploded after the quake. And 100 miles to the east, a storm with 170 mile-per-hour winds, the equivalent of a Category 5 hurricane, just became one of the most powerful storms on Earth. Every major forecast model points it directly at this same region. The same cities where buildings just collapsed. The same shelters where 8,800 people are sleeping tonight with no air conditioning and 93-degree heat. The same hospitals, 43 of them, that are already running without full power, water, or gas. The same cracked roads and broken bridges that are barely holding together after 190 aftershocks in 48 hours. Super Typhoon Dolphin is still intensifying. It has not peaked yet, and it is heading straight for a population that has not even finished counting its dead from the last disaster. Today, we are going to break down exactly how powerful this storm is, what condition Kumamoto is really in, and what the data says about where Dolphin is going and when it arrives. No guessing, no dramatizing. Just the confirmed numbers from NOAA, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, the Japan Meteorological Agency, and the U.S. Embassy on the ground. If you have ever been through an earthquake or a major storm, you know the worst part is not the event itself. It is what comes after. Tell us in the comments, what was the hardest part of your recovery? And if this is your first time here, we track earthquakes, typhoons, and extreme weather events every single day with real data and no hype. Subscribe so you do not miss what happens next with this storm as it approaches Japan over the coming week. The earthquake hit at 4:27 in the afternoon local time on July 28th. People in Kumamoto describe the same first sensation, a sharp jolt, then a rolling shove that pushed them sideways into walls. Objects flew off shelves, ceiling panels dropped. In Uki City and Hikawa Town, the shaking registered a Shindo 7. The Shindo scale is Japan's own measurement of how violently the ground moves at the surface, rated 1 through 7. A Shindo 7 is the maximum. It means buildings collapse, furniture becomes airborne, and the ground itself deforms. The Japan Meteorological Agency measured the quake at magnitude 7.1. The U.S. Geological Survey measured it at 6.8. Both agencies agree on the depth. The rupture happened just 10 kilometers below the surface, about 6 miles down. Shallow earthquakes deliver far more violent shaking at ground level than deep ones, because the energy has less rock to travel through before it hits your feet. Within the first hour, emergency calls flooded every prefectural line. By the second hour, the ground had shaken again, and again, and again. 190 aftershocks have followed the main quake in the last 48 hours. Some have been strong enough to send rescuers running back out of collapsed buildings. As of July 30th, the confirmed death toll stands at 18. 62 people are injured. Multiple people are still missing. The number is expected to rise. The worst single incident happened about 50 minutes after the initial quake. The Aeon Mall in Kashima Town, a shopping complex that had reopened just weeks earlier, exploded. Investigators believe a ruptured gas line ignited. 4 people are confirmed dead inside the mall. 3 workers are still missing under the rubble. Rescuers are cutting through concrete slabs by hand because heavy equipment cannot safely operate on ground that is still shifting. This mall matters for a reason we will return to at the end of this video. It had only reopened on June 13, 2026, after years of painstaking rebuilding from the 2016 Kumamoto earthquakes. It stood for 45 days before the ground broke it again. A few kilometers south, in Yatsushiro City, a factory chimney at Nippon Paper Industries collapsed during the shaking. 5 workers are confirmed dead. 4 more are believed still trapped inside the debris pile. Rescue teams are working in shifts because the heat is extreme and the air is thick with cement dust. A Vietnamese technical intern working on a construction site was killed by a falling crane. He is the first confirmed foreign national to die in this earthquake. His name has not yet been released publicly. Across the prefecture, 250 people are under evacuation orders. That is more than 222,000 people across 3 cities and 3 towns told to leave their homes. 8,800 of them are sleeping in more than 400 emergency shelters tonight. Most of those shelters do not have air conditioning. Outside, the temperature is hitting 93 degrees Fahrenheit. 3,900 homes have no electricity. Without power, families cannot run fans, cannot charge phones to receive government alerts, and cannot power medical devices like oxygen concentrators or dialysis machines. 815 households have no running water. In 93-degree heat, dehydration becomes a medical emergency within hours, not days. Elderly residents are the most exposed. 43 medical facilities across Kumamoto are operating without full electricity, water, or gas. Hospitals are running on generators and rationed supplies. Elective procedures are canceled. Doctors are triaging in hallways. The transportation system is broken in specific ways. Kumamoto Airport shut down immediately after the quake and has only resumed limited flights. The Kyushu Shinkansen bullet train is suspended between Kumamoto and Kagoshima. 26 highway sections are closed because of cracks, landslides, or bridge damage. Cell service is degraded in Yatsushiro. Every post office in the prefecture was closed on July 29th. Kumamoto Castle, one of the most recognizable landmarks in southern Japan, is damaged again. The full restoration from the 2016 earthquake was not scheduled to finish until 2052. Now that timeline has to be rewritten. Seismologists at the University of Tokyo confirmed on July 29th that this earthquake ruptured essentially the same mechanism as the 2016 sequence. The Heinagu fault is an active crack in the earth that runs through Kumamoto Prefecture. It broke in April 2016 in 2 major shocks. It is now broken again in 2026, using the same mechanism, in the same direction, on the same plane. The 2016 comparison matters, because the numbers from that event tell you what compound stress does to a population. 287 people died. 50 of them died directly from the shaking or from collapsing buildings. The other 218 died from what Japanese officials call disaster-related causes: evacuation stress, heat exposure, untreated chronic illness, cardiac events in shelters. That indirect toll was 4 times higher than the direct toll. 209 people were injured. 8,141 buildings were destroyed. Total losses reached between $24 and $46 billion. Right now, the same population is entering the same window that produced most of those indirect deaths in 2016. The heat is up, the water is off, the shelters are full. Rescue crews are working in temperatures that put them at risk of heat stroke themselves. And from 100 miles to the east, something else is growing. On July 26th, Dolphin was a disorganized cluster of clouds east of the Marshall Islands. Meteorologists classified it as Tropical Depression 12W and gave it a moderate chance of strengthening. By July 29th, it was a Category 4 super typhoon with 150-mile-per-hour winds. That is one of the fastest intensification rates the Western Pacific has seen since Typhoon Noru in 2022. A super typhoon is a typhoon with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour or more. Think of it as the Pacific Ocean's version of a Category 5 hurricane. Dolphin crossed that threshold in about 72 hours from a shapeless cluster of clouds. Meteorologists have a term for this: rapid intensification. It means a storm's wind speed jumps by at least 35 miles per hour in a single day. Dolphin nearly doubled that threshold. Its winds increased by 110 kilometers per hour, close to 70 miles per hour, in a single 24-hour period. As of July 30th, Dolphin's sustained winds are 270 kilometers per hour, or 168 miles per hour. Peak recorded gusts have hit 285 kilometers per hour, about 177 miles per hour. For reference, a Category 5 hurricane starts at 157 miles per hour. Dolphin is already well past that line and still climbing. The central pressure inside the storm is 935 hectopascals. Central pressure is the air pressure at the very center of a storm, measured in millibars. Normal air pressure at sea level is about 1,013. The lower the number, the stronger the storm. At 935, the difference between the pressure inside Dolphin and the pressure outside it is enormous. That gap is what drives the wind. Air rushes from high pressure to low pressure, and the bigger the gap, the harder it moves. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center forecasts Dolphin will peak at 305 kilometers per hour, roughly 190 miles per hour, by July 31st. The HESAS-A model, which is one of the most aggressive forecast systems for tropical cyclones, projects even higher. It shows Dolphin reaching 335 kilometers per hour, about 180 knots. If Dolphin hits 190 miles per hour, it becomes the strongest storm anywhere on Earth in 2026. It would surpass Typhoon Sinlaku, which peaked at 185 miles per hour in April. It would surpass Typhoon Bavi, which peaked at 180 miles per hour earlier in July. It would match Typhoon Napartuk from 2016 as the strongest July tropical cyclone of the 21st century. And it would begin to approach the intensity of Typhoon Wanda in 1956, the strongest July storm in recorded meteorological history. Dolphin also just completed an eye wall replacement cycle. An eye wall replacement cycle is a process where the inner ring of a typhoon's strongest winds collapses and a new ring forms around it. The storm usually weakens for a few hours during this cycle. Then it often comes back stronger. Dolphin finished its cycle and kept intensifying, which is exactly the pattern forecasters least want to see. The storm is currently 140 miles east of Guam and 2,680 miles from Kadena Air Base on Okinawa. It is moving northwest at 10 to 15 miles per hour. Dolphin is the third super typhoon of the Western Pacific summer. Sinlaku hit in April, Bavi hit in early July. Dolphin is now the third Category 4 or 5 equivalent storm to threaten the region in a single 4-month window. That kind of clustering is unusual, and it is one reason meteorologists have been watching this basin all summer with growing concern. The numbers tell you how strong this storm is. But the track tells you why this story is different from every other typhoon this season. Forecast models do not always agree on where a typhoon will go. With Dolphin, they almost all agree, and that is part of what makes this so alarming. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center measures forecast agreement using something called cross-track spread. It is the distance between the different possible tracks the models are drawing. At 3 days out, the spread on Dolphin is only 185 kilometers. At 5 days out, it is 352 kilometers. Those are small numbers. They mean the models are drawing almost the same line. The global forecast system from NOAA and the European model ensembles both point at southwestern Japan. Specifically, they point at Shikoku or Kyushu. Some model guidance has shifted slightly west toward Okinawa. The Thai Meteorological Department has issued a projection that names Kumamoto Prefecture as a potential landfall zone with arrival around August 7th. After Japan, the models show possible continuation into Jiangsu province in eastern China around August 9th. The first population in the path is Okinawa. 1.2 million civilians live on the island chain. 30,000 U.S. military personnel are stationed there. That includes Kadena Air Base, Camp Foster, and Marine Corps Air Station Futenma. Across all U.S. bases in Japan, roughly 55,000 American troops are currently deployed. Those bases are in a seasonal tropical cyclone condition of readiness posture, which is routine for this time of year, but the readiness level can escalate within hours as track confidence improves. The second population in the potential path is Kumamoto Prefecture itself. 1.68 million people live there. 738,000 of them live in Kumamoto City alone. These are the same people who are, right now, without water, without power, and sleeping in gymnasiums with no air conditioning. The 2026 season context matters. Sinlaku hit the northern Mariana Islands in April as a Category 4. It killed 17 people, left 43,000 without power, and caused $458 million in damage. Bavi hit Guam and Rota as a Category 5 in early July, with peak winds of 180 miles per hour. Dolphin would be the third major hit in 4 months, and it would be aimed at the most vulnerable stretch of coastline in the entire region. There are weakening factors ahead. In about 3 days, the poleward outflow above Dolphin, which is the flow of air out of the top of the storm that keeps it organized, becomes restricted. Ocean heat content along the projected track also begins to drop as the storm moves north. Both of those factors typically weaken a typhoon before landfall. Meteorologists expect Dolphin to be weaker at landfall than it is at its peak. But a weakened super typhoon is still a super typhoon. Even a downgrade to Category 3 or Category 4 at landfall carries enormous destructive potential. Category 3, sustained winds start at 111 miles per hour. That is fast enough to tear roofs off well-built homes, snap large trees, and cut power to entire prefectures for days. The question is not just how strong Dolphin will be when it arrives. The question is what it arrives into. Because the infrastructure, the shelters, the roads, the hospitals, and the people waiting in Kumamoto are not in normal condition. They are in post-earthquake condition. And that changes everything. There is a term scientists use when two natural disasters overlap in the same place at the same time. They call it a compound disaster. And it does not mean the damage adds up. It means the damage multiplies. A compound disaster happens when two or more natural events hit a region whose emergency response systems were built for one event at a time. Fire crews trained for structural collapse are still working the earthquake. Hospitals absorbing crush injuries have no spare beds for storm casualties. Utility workers rebuilding water mains cannot pivot to clearing downed power lines. Every system is already at capacity when the second event arrives. Look at the numbers on the ground in Kumamoto right now, and you can see how a typhoon would multiply each one. The 26 highway sections that are already closed are the same routes people would use to evacuate ahead of a storm. Evacuation options are limited before a single drop of rain falls. The 34,900 homes without power cannot receive digital storm warnings, cannot charge phones, and cannot run refrigerators to store insulin or other temperature-sensitive medication. If the storm knocks out more of the grid, restoration crews start from an already degraded baseline. The 56,115 households without water face a different problem. Storm shelter guidance normally tells people to fill bathtubs and containers with clean water before landfall. In Kumamoto, tens of thousands of families cannot fill anything. Their taps are dry. Dehydration risk during shelter in place is already extreme. The 43 medical facilities operating without full utilities cannot absorb a wave of storm injuries. Surge capacity does not exist. Every hospital bed with power is already occupied. The 400 shelters holding 8,800 evacuees have limited room for a second wave of displaced people. If the typhoon forces coastal evacuations, the existing shelters will need to double or triple their occupancy in a matter of hours. There is a structural dimension too. Buildings that survive the earthquake are not the same buildings they were on July 27th. Load-bearing walls have hairline cracks. Foundations have shifted, roofs have separated from frames by inches or millimeters. Those buildings can still stand under normal loads. Under typhoon wind, loads of 100 to 130 miles per hour, they can fail in ways that would not have been possible before the shaking. Aftershock risk continues during and after a typhoon. A strong aftershock during heavy rainfall dramatically increases landslide probability on already loosened hillsides. Coastal seawalls that cracked during the earthquake let storm surge push further inland than the original design allowed. Storm surge is a wall of ocean water pushed onto land by a typhoon's winds. Under normal conditions, seawalls hold most of it back. In an earthquake zone, where those seawalls are cracked, the water finds every gap. The 2016 precedent tells you what compound stress does to a population. 218 of the 277 deaths in that earthquake were disaster-related. They were caused by evacuation stress, heat exposure, and untreated illness. They happened in the weeks after the shaking stopped. A typhoon arriving during that same window in 2026 would not just add its own casualties, it would multiply the indirect deaths from the earthquake itself. And then there is the Aeon Mall. The Aeon Mall in Kashima was destroyed in the 2016 Kumamoto earthquakes. It took years to rebuild. It reopened on June 13, 2026. It stood for 45 days. On July 28, 2026, it exploded. Recovery is not permanent. It can be undone in an afternoon. The data is clear. The storm is real. The earthquake damage is real. What happens next depends on the exact track, the exact timing, and the decisions made in the next 5 to 7 days. The story is not over. It is barely beginning. Here is exactly what to watch over the next week. July 31st is the peak intensity window. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center forecasts Dolphin will hit its maximum wind speed on that date. If it reaches 190 miles per hour, it becomes the strongest storm anywhere on Earth in 2026. Watch for updated advisories from JTWC in the next 24 to 48 hours. August 4th through August 3 is the track convergence window. Forecast models get more accurate as the storm gets closer. By 3 days out from landfall, the possible tracks tighten significantly. This is when we will know whether Okinawa takes the direct hit, whether Kumamoto is the target, or whether the storm shifts further west into mainland China. August 5 through August 7 is the projected arrival window at Japan. Weakening is expected during this window, but even a downgraded storm at these intensities is catastrophic for damaged infrastructure. The Japan Meteorological Agency will issue progressive warning levels as Dolphin approaches. Watch specifically for the violent typhoon designation, which is the highest classification the agency uses. U.S. military bases across Okinawa and mainland Japan will likely escalate their tropical cyclone condition of readiness posture in the next 48 to 72 hours. When bases move to TCCOR1, non-essential personnel shelter in place and aircraft are secured or evacuated. Earthquake aftershock monitoring continues in parallel. A strong aftershock during the typhoon approach window would further destabilize buildings, roads, and slopes. The Japan Meteorological Agency has warned residents to expect aftershocks of magnitude 5 or higher for at least another week. JTWC notes that 2 additional low-pressure areas may form behind Dolphin over the coming days. The Western Pacific storm season is not slowing down. We will be covering every development as it happens. Look at the Aeon Mall in Kashima. On June 13, 2026, it reopened. Families walked through it for the first time in years. Children rode the escalators. Elderly couples ate lunch at the food court. It was a symbol of what recovery from the 2016 earthquake looked like. It represented years of construction, hundreds of millions of yen in investment, and the belief that this community had put its worst day behind it. 45 days later, on July 28, 2026, the same building exploded. The same fault line ruptured. The same community stood outside the wreckage. The same rescue teams cut through the same kind of debris they cut through in 2016. The same building, the same community, the same fault, 10 years apart and back to where it started. Recovery is not a finish line. In a region where the ground shakes and the storms come, it is a process that never ends. And now, with a super typhoon approaching that same region within days, the question becomes whether recovery can even begin before the next disaster arrives. The greatest danger is not the earthquake or the typhoon alone. It is the assumption that recovery means safety. The data shows the same fault will rupture again, the same warm Pacific will breed more storms, and the same coastline will face both. Preparedness is not a one-time action. It is a permanent condition. Tell us in the comments, have you ever lived through one disaster followed quickly by another? A storm after a flood, a power outage during a heat wave, an aftershock during a rainstorm. What was it like when the second event hit before the first one was over? We read every response, and your experience is what shapes how we cover these stories. This typhoon will develop rapidly over the next 5 to 7 days. We will cover every shift in the track, every new warning, and every escalation as it happens. This is the channel that follows the full timeline, not just the headline. Subscribe so you see the next update the moment it drops. And if you know someone living in Japan, someone stationed at a Pacific base, or anyone with family in Okinawa or Kyushu, share this video. They need to see what is coming.